You know, the world has lots of problems. You can read about them in the news. Problems of poverty, disease, unclean water, lots of problems. There are solutions to these problems, but the solutions will need lots of professionals. They'll need engineers, health workers, managers, and others. We'll need professionals who are young, smart, talented, educated, and most important of all, motivated to solve all these problems. In a word, we'll need a new kind of young professional. We'll need professionals who are willing to work methodically and incrementally over years, maybe even decades, to solve these problems. And they'll do it with no fanfare. They'll do it without getting a lot of credit. Now, these aren't the Wall Street types. These aren't the types that take their university degrees and go off and make millions. These young professionals have a different type of agenda. Now, you might wonder, do these people really exist? Well, I'd like you to meet Bridget Lewis. Bridget worked on a project in Chile a few years ago. She worked on a project to create a new kind of nonprofit organization to take care of some problems that the health and social service agencies working in that part of Chile were having. They needed information technology consulting services. They had information technology, but they didn't know how to use it. In the meantime, there was a nearby university that had lots of technology expertise. And so Bridget, working with a colleague, created a nonprofit corporation to take that expertise that existed within the university and to transfer it to the health and social service agencies that needed it so much. Here's how Bridget describes that.
And we worked on this project for Don Eugenio, who's the director of their Centro Informático, which is the organization within the university that maintains the computers, updates the networks, keeps all the technology running for the university. And he had this idea that he wanted to start a IT consulting firm in the area so that they could take the technology experience and the knowledge that the Centro Informático had or other experts in the area, and they could disseminate that and raise the overall level of technology of the region. So Minji and I were there to do market research and to write a business plan for this proposed IT consulting firm.
I'd also like you to meet Adrian White. Adrian worked on a project in Ghana, which is a West African nation, a poor West African nation. It was a project to help a small university there called Ashesi University. Ashesi was founded with two visions. The first vision was to create high-quality education for African students. This is actually pretty rare in Africa. The second part of the vision was to educate a new kind of African leader, an ethical African leader. This is something that's even rarer than the first one. It turns out the founder of Ashesi University, Patrick Awuah, is a former TED speaker, and he very eloquently articulated this vision in a past TED presentation. So after 5 years of operation, Ashesi University was doing very well. In fact, it had already been recognized as one of the leading universities in all of West Africa after only 5 years. But Ashesi had a practical problem. They didn't have a student record system. What is a student record system? A student record system is the computer system that keeps track of student enrollments, course registrations, grades, degree requirements. Sounds pretty fundamental, right, for a university? Sounds like something every university would need. But Ashesi, because of other priorities, at that point they had not yet created a student record system, so they were just kind of limping along on a makeshift system. So within just a few months, Adrian created a situation where a Shesi could have a student record system. Within just a few months, she analyzed the problem using her professional skills. She wrote a request for proposals to software companies, selected a software company, led the university executives through the process of executing that contract, and finally put in place a plan and made arrangements for the system to be installed and for the university employees to be trained on how to use the system. Here's what Adrian had to say about that.
Prior to my project, the faculty and staff managed student grades using a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. And everyone was using this spreadsheet to put in grades and manage transcripts. On demand, a transcript would be generated, and it was a manual sort of thing. So with more growth anticipated in enrollment, they really saw the need to get another system to do those sort of tasks. So my project centered around finding another system, another software package that they could readily use that would be better than what they were currently using.
But what's really impressive is when this work was done, both of these young women were students. They were still university students. They had not yet graduated. And you know, I'm a university professor, and I have great privilege in working with these kinds of students on a variety of projects, projects inside the United States and also in other parts of the world. This experience that I've had, and by the way, I've been very fortunate in my career to have been an inventor, a researcher, taught lots of courses, but this is the high point for me. Working with these kind of students, it leads me to believe that these young professionals can and will change the world. This is the vision. These young professionals will change the world. Now, the students that I work with, they're not just volunteers. They're not interns, they're not trainees, they're not just helping out. They're working as full consultants. They're actually peers to the executives that they work with in universities, government agencies, non-governmental organizations, and nonprofit organizations. It turns out that this kind of experience is a critical part of their education as professionals. They come back a few years later and they tell us, this was the best part of my whole 4-year education. It also, in some cases, they tell us, this was a life-changing experience. This is what led me to change the direction of my career and change the direction of my life. So it's really quite a story, and this is why the experience is so rewarding for me. Now, in addition to the project work itself, students have the experience, sort of a fringe benefit, of living and working in a foreign country, experiencing a foreign culture. When Adrian worked in Ghana, she had the opportunity to visit the so-called slaving prisons. These were the prisons where in the 17 and 1800s, African slaves were held before they were put on ships to be sent to the Americas. So you can imagine for Adrian as an African American, this was a very meaningful experience to her. On another level, though, there's the just kind of the day-to-day looking after your accommodations, shopping for groceries, shopping for the necessities of life. And in a place like Ghana, every shopping experience is a negotiation. I'm sure you have experienced this in your travels. So one day, Adrian said to me, after she'd been in Ghana for less than a week, she said, you know, I think I'd like to learn a little bit of the local tribal language. It's called Twi. Well, everyone speaks English there. I said, Adrian, you're only here for a few months. Everyone speaks English. Why do you want to learn Twi? She said, well, if I drop a few words of Twi into the conversation, then they'll think I'm a local. And if they think I'm a local, I'll get better prices. And sure enough, she did it. So foreigners usually pay about 3 to 4 times what locals do there, and Adrian was really able to stretch her budget that way. Now, Bridget had a different kind of experience in the southern part of Chile. Her fringe benefit was that she was in prime tourist country. She was in Patagonia. You heard about Patagonia a little while ago. So she hiked to the top of an active volcano. She soaked in the hot springs at the base of the mountain. She traveled all around Patagonia to these world-class destinations that tourists pay thousands of dollars to go to these places. For Bridget, it was a $20 bus ticket, and she was there. So that was her fringe benefit. But Bridget also experienced the stresses and strains of actually working in a foreign culture, in a foreign language. She didn't speak English at all in her work. She only spoke Spanish because that's the only thing that was practical. She had to interview 100 people to do her market assessment for the organization that she was creating. It was stressful, and she actually speaks about that honestly. But in spite of all that, the benefits of these projects are huge. They're not financial benefits because these are volunteers, but the non-financial benefits in terms of career development, and by the way, the client also gets a lot of really great free consulting work. Well, we do projects like this inside the United States. We've actually had hundreds of students at my university work on these kinds of projects. Outside the United States, we have been doing this for about 5 years. We've had 60 students work in 32 projects in 11 developing nations, and you can see the pins in the map there, all the way from Ghana in the west, all the way over to Chile in the east. This year I'm working with 2 Alaskan universities. So you might find this interesting. We're starting similar programs at UAA, University of Alaska Anchorage, and also Alaska Pacific University up in Anchorage, putting, in the case of UAA, engineering students working with nonprofit corporations as consultants. This fall, we've got students who are going to be doing renewable energy projects in the Matsu Valley, and we also have students who are going to be working to create computer devices to allow handicapped people with things like cerebral palsy to be able to use a computer. With cerebral palsy, in some cases, the shaking is just too much to be able to use a conventional input-output technology. So the effort this year is to get these similar kinds of programs started in Alaska. These will not be international programs because we've got plenty of needs in Alaska. We're going to start on the road system, and then the vision is to then branch out to rural Alaskan villages. My wife and I lived in rural Alaska for quite a few years, and so we know, and you all know, that the villages in rural Alaska really do have lots of needs, lots of nonprofit corporations to be our clients. So that's the next step, is to work with these Alaska universities, and then later to propagate these programs to other universities all around the country, just dependent on what their expertise is. So in the case of UAA, we're working with engineering. In the case of Alaska Pacific University, it's with the business school. There'll be business students who will be doing these projects, and we have lots of nonprofit corporations that are kind of lined up to be able to get that management consulting service. It's all in support of the vision. The vision is that these young professionals can and will change the world. But what about Bridget and Adrian? What are they doing today? Well, Bridget, it turns out, after she completed her project and after she graduated from the university, she decided to completely redirect her focus from what she had been thinking about earlier. And so since she graduated, she's already volunteered to work on a couple of World Heritage projects, and she's taken a job with a special kind of consulting company in the Seattle area, which only works on these kind of high impact projects. They're a design consulting firm, but they only work on the high impact projects of the type that I've described. So that's Bridget's story. Actually, Bridget can tell you about it a little bit in her own words.
I think one of the main reasons I was accepted to that is because I could point back to this thing I did in Chile and say, look, I've done on-site consulting for a very tight timeline, with this very small team, much smaller team, meeting new people, doing market research on site, and just hitting the ground running. I can do that. I've done it before, see? And the two of those together, help me set me up for future things. I'm now working at a user-centered design consulting firm that's working on social projects with social impact, called Anthrotech. And I think doing the work in Chile and doing the project at the World Heritage that the work at Chile helped me get this job.
Now, Adrian's story is a little different. Adrian, when she finished her project and then graduated, she took a conventional job in the United States, but Ghana was always on her mind. She really had a great experience in Ghana. And so this fall, she's taking some time off from her job to return to Ghana to work on a clean water project. So this is how Adrian describes, first of all, her experience of living in Ghana, and secondly, what she has planned for the fall.
Not all my time in Ghana was spent just doing work. I really had a good time. I enjoyed the people. My expectations of Africa, really, I didn't have any. But when I got there, I was just surprisingly delighted. So my experience there was really a good one. The experience has had an impact on me to continue, seeking out those sort of opportunities to help with developing nation-related projects. Right now, I'm doing a paper related to technology and how it can be used to provide water consistently.
So I think you can see that these experiences have a huge impact on these young professionals. This is how Bridget reflects on the whole thing.
It was one of the most painful, lonely, miserable, rewarding, memorable, and wonderful parts of college for me. And I learned more in those 10 weeks than I think I did in any other semester, or more than a semester in college. I would highly recommend it to anybody who gets a chance to go.
So now I think you can probably see what I mean when I say that these young professionals will change the world. Some will work on a full-time basis, like Bridget, others on a part-time basis, like Adrian, but the important part is they started early. They started when they were still university students. And that's why I'm working to create this network of universities that I described, universities to advise and support each other, universities that will help each other, just as I'm helping UAA and APU this fall. And if you'll help me to spread the word on this, I think you can be sure that these young professionals will change the world. Thank you.